It's really an honor for me to be able to come out from DC to talk about something that's happening right now at this moment, this legislation that could be introduced any day now. But before I get started, I wanted to talk a little bit about how I got involved in this issue. My background's in newspaper and magazine reporting, and I was working at the Chicago Tribune covering shootings and murders and dead bodies, and it was leaving me feeling pretty hopeless. I mean, it's not the type of thing I went into journalism to do. And I had a background in community organizing in college, including environmental issues and animal protection work, organizing against the WTO in Seattle and economic sanctions in Iraq. And as a journalist, I couldn't be out there protesting, but I thought I could at least go out and hand out leaflets. I thought that was the most I could do as a working reporter. And so I went out passing out leaflets with a group of activists, and of course, because I have the worst luck of anyone I know, we were all arrested. And it was my first time ever arrested. The charges were later thrown out, but the important part of that story is that a couple weeks later I was visited by 2 FBI agents. And they told me that unless I helped them by becoming an informant and investigating and infiltrating protest groups, that they would put me on a domestic terrorist list. And so this is only a few months after 9/11, and I think like a lot of us, we really still don't know what that means. What's the power of that word, the power of these lists? Is this an empty threat? Are they going to really make sure I don't receive a Fulbright grant I had at the time pending, or is that just, BS, or what does all this really mean? And I was really ashamed of that fear. I was embarrassed that bothered me, and that I didn't just kind of, puff my chest and walk away with the middle finger in the air and not care about what the FBI said, right? Because that's what I always wanted to think I would do in that situation. But after that fear went away, I really became obsessed with finding out how all of this has happened. How these activists who have never harmed anyone have become the #1 domestic terrorism threat, according to the FBI. So that's kind of a big picture look at how I got immersed in this issue. I'll talk about that a little bit more later. But the reason I'm here today is to talk about these Ag-Gag laws. And to talk about that, I think we need to know what a factory farm is and what animal agriculture is. And of course, this is where animal products come from, right? This is the state of animal agriculture. There's red barns and happy cows and farmers, and we're all told this from a very young age. We have toy sets and PR campaigns and media campaigns to all reinforce this positive, wonderful image of the happy farm and Farmer Brown and the little red barns. But in the last few years especially, undercover investigations by national organizations have exposed a very different side of what modern animal agriculture is globally. That it's more of a factory system where billions of animals are killed every year. And their photographs, this one from a group called Mercy for Animals, along with their undercover video, has completely changed the national dialogue about these issues. I mean, we're at the point now where you have Bill Clinton and Oprah Winfrey and Al Gore and Ellen DeGeneres all talking about not just animal cruelty, but going vegan and vegetarian. I mean, this is a radical shift from even 5 years ago, let alone 10 or 15. On top of that, though, and on top of that discussion that's taking place, there have been concrete results from these investigations, like the largest meat recall in U.S. history. This happened after the Humane Society documented sick cows that were being pushed around by bulldozers. That's illegal because the sick cows should not be entering the food supply. And at this particular plant, those cows were being turned into meat and fed to children as part of the National School Lunch Program. It was one of the USDA's kind of flagship facilities. So once this was exposed, it led to this largest meat recall we've ever seen in this country. It's also led to criminal charges out in North Carolina and many other states where workers have been exposed doing things like beating turkeys with metal pipes. I think one of the most damning consequences of these exposés, though, is that the industry has been flailing in response. Instead of saying, no, that's horrible, or we're going to investigate, or we're going to change our practices, They've just adamantly defended all of it. So in other words, these investigators are exposing what are standard industry practices, not just for animals, but the circumstances they put workers in, the consequences for the environment. And the industry is just saying things like, body slamming piglets to death is humane, pork experts say. The dominant message coming from this industry is that they don't need anyone else policing them. They can do it by themselves. But what's never mentioned, and I think what most people would be really shocked to learn, is that the agriculture industry, one of the most powerful in the world, there's not a single law that protects farmed animals during their lives in the United States. There are a couple laws that protect the animals as they're being transported to slaughter, or at the point that they're actually being slaughtered. But even those specifically exempt birds. That's 95% of all animals that are killed. On top of that, 25 states have exemptions for what they call customary practices. And what do you know? Customary practices are defined by the industry that's setting their own standards. So anything that the ag industry in those states says is normal is therefore not part of animal cruelty laws. So whether it's cutting the beaks off of chickens or cutting the pigs off of cutting the pigs off of pigs, or cutting the tails off of pigs, or anything that's defined as a standard industry practice. I say all this because another way of describing it would be that between 8 and 9 billion animals are raised every year in this country alone for food by an industry with virtually no oversight, no checks and balances, and no system of accountability.